For the past few months, we have been speaking as a Sangha about vow in general and about the Four Bodhisattva Vows in particular. And those of you who are joining us probably know, these four vows are really the linchpin of the Bodhisattva path. They are, in one sense, what explicitly distinguishes the Theravada from the Mahayana, not because Theravada practitioners do not aspire to realize themselves for the sake of everyone and do not serve for the sake of everyone, but because just in Mahayana that was explicitly stated at a certain point about 400 years after the Buddha's death. The understanding, I suppose, the realization that it was important to express explicitly, this is not just for me. That was good and necessary and helpful to do. And the version of the vows that we use is the version that I learned in the Mountains and Rivers order, in a wording that is very vast, that is really all-encompassing, and some would say impossible. But that means our vow needs to be that large, that wide, that deep. And we have also been working on taking that vastness and that vastness and making it very immediate, very concrete, very actionable, and relatable. So that if you were speaking to your neighbor Joe, who knows nothing about Buddhism, you could reframe these in a sentence each, and he would understand. We are kind of coming to a close on that, with that practice, but I had pending a talk on the second vow because we did them a little bit out of order. I started with the third vow, went to the fourth, then the first, and now we're wrapping up with the second vow. Desires are numberless. I vowed to put an end to them. So this is that talk. And of course, although this wraps up our particular study cycle of the vows, it does not actually wrap up our study. Our practice, our realization, hopefully our embodiment, our continued, ever deepening embodiment of these vows. And that is why I wanted to do what we did. No, not because they in any way need correcting or even translating, but because it helps to have to grapple with all of the teachings of the Dharma. In one sense, that's what koan study forces us to do, because it takes a little bit, a piece of Dharma, and then it really forces you to be with it, right? To sit with it so that you can sharpen your understanding. The way that I have been working with some of you who do shikantaza, particularly with the Faith Mind poem, same thing. You have to take a line and really be with it and really ask, what is this? Like, what is this saying? What is it saying to me in my life right now? How do I use it? And so, with this second vow, I have spoken in the past, some of you know about my dislike, my hesitation about the wording of this vow. And I attempted to Well, I tweaked it by changing the second half of the vow to, I vow to liberate them. Desires are numberless, I vow to liberate them. Because you can't really put an end to desires. Right? The desire to awaken is a desire. So I often say, the moment you stop having desires is the moment you're dead. Same as the moment you stop having thoughts. It's because you're dead. And so I tweaked it. And then, in general, I have no qualms about changing our liturgy if I feel it will bring something to the chant, to the teaching contained in the chant. Certainly, if I feel that it would help me to use it more skillfully. But I didn't feel settled about this particular change. And, here between us, I still like liberate better than to put an end to them. But this is such an important chant in our tradition. And this wording, the wording of the all four vows, is kind of iconic in our order. And I associate it so strongly with my first teacher, Daido Roshi. And he would always focus or bring our attention to the fact that they seem to be contradictory, the first part and the second part of the vow. Sentient beings are numberless. They're infinite. How could I possibly save them all? And yet I vow to do it. And it was that very impossibility that gave them their power. And so to change, to put an end to them, to liberate them, shifts a little bit that dynamic opposition, if you will. And so I switched it back to the original, and that's the version that we chant every Wednesday. Now, in Buddhism, desire is the engine of samsara, right? The endless cycle of birth and death. It is what causes us to grasp for existence, to want to be, which is the strongest desire there is. That's what keeps the whole wheel turning, the desire to be. And so if ignorance is the ground on which our lives are constructed, and of course here by ignorance we mean our misunderstanding of the way things are, the way things work. And it's actually not just ignorance, but also delusion. Like we actively construct a story to explain our misunderstanding. Right? And the perfect example of this is when we set out to get something. I don't know, like a promotion at work. And then we don't get it. And we tell ourselves, I don't really want it in the first place. I'm much better off where I am. And it's different from finding opportunity. It's different from acceptance. It's constructing a story. So delusion, as I was reading that somewhere, and they made that specific distinction. Ignorance is the opposite of wisdom, right? A lack of understanding. But then delusion is adding on to that lack by creating a story that justifies it. Samsara is not so bad. And so if ignorance is the ground, then desire is the topsoil on which all sorts of plants and trees and shrubs grow, and some are healthy and abundant, especially the ones that inspire us to look for a different way, that set us on the path. all of us who are here at some point thought there has to be a different way. Something, some seed germinated. And just think for a moment, if conditions were just a tiny little bit different. You were born in a different town, 5 minutes later, Szymborska, Wisława Szymborska has a poem like this. I don't even know where the book. Oh, I do have the book, but I don't have it with me. But so I'll come back to it. But it's a book that is exactly like that. A poem that says exactly that. If it was 5 minutes later in another town, the note that was left but not read, all the chain of circumstances that have led to this moment, kind of magical, really, if you think about it. And so some of those seeds have led to this gathering of noble friends. But ignorance and desire do travel hand in hand. They're kind of like, partners in crime. And at the same time, as I said, we can't not want. And of course, then the question becomes, then how do we work with desire? How do we, in fact, liberate it? How do we liberate ourselves, not from it, but within it? And as the Buddha taught in his last teaching, the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, to have few desires and to learn how to be satisfied. A teaching I've always really loved and have spoken of a number of times in the past. And so tonight I thought I would speak of it a little bit differently, to address this vow, to put an end to desires, to liberate ourselves within desire. Some years ago, I had the good fortune to travel to Florence. And while there, I learned about la bella figura, the beautiful figure. And it's a quintessentially Italian concept. It's a way of being, a way of looking at the self and looking at the world. And on the surface, it could seem to be about the surface. Italians very much care about how they look and how they appear to others. And la bella figura stands in contrast to la brutta figura, the ugly figure. The wrong dress, the wrong word, the wrong time or place. And it's almost like a social offense. And so la bella figura is the opposite of that. It's a kind of elegance and grace. So it's pleasing. And I've told some of you, when I was in college, I took Italian for a couple of years. And my professor was Giovanna Calvino, the daughter of the writer Italo Calvino. And she was doing a PhD in French literature at UPenn and teaching Italian really to first and I think and second year students 5 days a week. And she was always impeccably dressed. The rest of us would just go to class, like in sweats, like with hats, just like disheveled. And I didn't used to be disheveled. In Mexico has a little bit of a thing where you also, you dress up a little. But then I got there and everybody was like, rolling out of bed quite literally into classroom. And I was like, oh, because I was always running, going to run, coming from a run, going to swim or coming from a swim. So I was like, okay, nobody else seems to care. she was like impeccably dressed. And at least for that first semester, I swear that she did not repeat wardrobe once. 5 days a week. That's how it seemed to us, at least. So, but it could seem like on the surface, like it would be, superficial or elitist. It could even be like catty. But if you really think of it holistically, if you think of it as a way of life, then it becomes about living life gracefully, elegantly, and focused on what is most important, not unlike Zen. Now and then I do a thought experiment, and thinking about La Bella Figura made me think of this. I think if I was told, hardly a novel thought experiment, but if I was told that I have 6 months to live, what would I tell myself so as not to waste this last little bit of time? And the answer is always some version of spend more time doing the things that you love, with the people you love. Try something new. Learn something you didn't know. Go somewhere you've never been. It's never work more, spend more time on email. Do what you always do because that's safe and comfortable, even though I often do. And so to encourage myself to remember the world is vast and wide. Where are you in the midst of that vastness? Are you vast and wide? Meaning me, I ask myself, are you vast and wide? Or are you hiding in the broom closet? And let me just add that vastness, it can be approached in a couple of ways. A myriad ways, but, you can go wide or you can go deep. You can do one thing to its very end. There's a Latvian painter by the name of Vija Selmans. And she only paints ocean waves or the night sky. Spider web now and then, and something else. I couldn't remember what the fourth thing was, but I didn't see that. I only saw the waves and the sky in an exhibit at MoMA. Painting after painting, drawing after drawing of ocean waves and night sky. And the waves especially are so realistic, you think you're looking at a photograph. And there's an interview with her, and they show her, she's hunched over her easel in her studio, and she's meticulously scraping off paint off of a canvas in order to paint stars. And there's a photograph next to her, brush in her hand, a little bit of oil paint, and time. And at one point she says, I've been painting this one image, which is maybe about this big. I've been painting this one image for 3 years. 3 years. We get bored just following our breath. And there she is. Star after star, galaxy after galaxy. And in that following of the breath, it's exactly the same thing. In and out, from lungs to environment, a whole world, a whole ocean. Just that there was a whole universe on that canvas, an entire ocean in her mind. And she says, for some people this could be a little tedious. She says, but for me, it's kind of like being there. It's kind of like being there. For some people, doing 700 koans might be a little tedious. But with each one, it is like being there. Do you understand? She is that night sky. She's not painting stars, she's painting her heart. She's painting her guts. She's painting the sea inside. And in order to do this, I mean, really, in order to do anything worth doing, we have to slow down. We have to be silent. We have to be alone for a little while. We have to work with our minds simply yet gracefully. Because a cluttered mind can't settle. A rushing mind wants to settle but doesn't know how. And so this is la bella figura, kind of Zen style. There's a Roman saying, mangia bene, ridi spesso, ama molto. Eat well, laugh often, love much. Tweak that just a little bit. Live simply, laugh often, love much. Maybe we could call that la sveglia figura, which is, sveglia is smart or sharp, but it's also awake. Have few desires, know how to be satisfied is the actual wording. But I said learn on purpose. Learn how to be satisfied, because I think the verb needs to be active and it needs to be ongoing. It needs to be deliberate. Have few desires. Which ones? Which ones? How do you know? Because the problem is not that we have desires, but that they run away from us. And then they create harm, right? Inside and outside. To live simply doesn't mean you have nothing. You know, your robe and your bowl. For some, it does mean that. It means to know what you have and why. It means to know where it came from and where it will go. I said this last week, you know, how keenly I felt as I was putting all of my life into bags, into suitcases, that I would need to lug down 5 flights of stairs, take to the airport, bring up here, thankfully here there's an elevator, into my new place. And every single one of those things, I would hold it in my hand and it's like, do I need this? But if I don't take it, what will happen to it? I don't want to just put it in the trash, because then it will end up in the ocean somewhere. So I'm responsible for this thing, this little vase, this pair of socks that's old, whatever it is. Every single one of those things came from somewhere, will end up somewhere, and during its life and mine, we're intertwined. I mean, we're always intertwined, but it's very obvious right now. And therefore, my responsibility. How many kitchen implements do I need? How many mugs? How many dog toys or books? All the books, actually, all the books. I actually gave, with some pain in my heart, I gave away a bunch of books. How do we live gracefully, lovingly, so that what we have is not a burden, but is a joy? And of course, not all of life is joyful or elegant or graceful or beautiful. I know that, I realize that. But much of it is, if we know where to look and if we know how to look. And this is what so much of practice is about. Right? It's not a matter of money. That's the story. Companies, media, advertising would like us to believe, to our own and to the earth's detriment. I think really it's mostly of a matter of time and space and a matter of looking, a matter of seeing, really seeing what we stand to lose when we just rush by in our lives, when we spend our time fighting one another or just accumulating stuff to protect ourselves, kind of to create ramparts around ourselves. And so I think most pointedly, it's a matter of wanting to see more than anything else. Wanting to see and wanting to be free. Because even the most exquisite thing we could dream up for ourselves cannot measure up with what is already here. I can guarantee that. There was once a woman who dreamt that she was spinning. She woke up in the center of a group of whirling dervishes. And, as she was spinning with her arms wide, dervishes flanking her on either side, with each turn she realized what she was doing was really celebrating her embodiment. The fact that she was alive and in form and in human form, such that she could even think this, recognize this, celebrate this, and that this is really something she could have been doing, perhaps should have been doing every moment of every day. Because she wasn't nothing, right? She was something, she was someone fully clothed in form. And so she spun, and as she was spinning faster and faster, she started crying. And at one point, she caught the eye of a man who was just standing by the side of the circle, smiling, looking at her and smiling. And when their eyes locked, he just called her over. And so she slowed down, and then she stopped her spinning. And then she approached the man, whom she saw was standing next to what seemed to be like an endless rack of suits. They were all different colors, and they're all translucent, like gossamer, like spider web. And she said to him, "What are these?" And he said, "They're beliefs. Want to try them on?" And so she did. She took one out. And it was, "You have everything that you need." And it fit well. But she thought, let me keep looking. And then she put on another one. "You're always late." She didn't like that one so much. She put it back. And she kept trying on these different suits until she got to the one that says, "I am not enough. And she said that was the heaviest suit of all. And it was a suit that she had been carrying most of her life. She took it off, put it back on the rack. Words Are Gifts, another suit. She tried it and she loved it. But she also loved Do What You Love on Purpose. And she kept going, trying on these suits until she got to Everything is Sacred. And that suit fit so well, so perfectly, that she decided to keep it. She said to the guy, can I just wear it? He said, sure. She put it on, and then she returned to the whirling circle, besuited in sacredness, she said. And eventually she spun herself awake. And the suit still fit her perfectly. Because it was her own skin. It was the very fabric of her being. I just dream that I have to get to the airport and I can't. Some people have these dreams. And this same woman, whose name is Chloe Hope, she's a writer who writes about death and birds together, exquisitely. She says, what if life wants to be seen and loved, just as we do? And what if the more we love it, the more it shows of itself, just as we do? I added that part. What if the more we love life, the more it shows of itself? And it's asking to be loved, like we are asking to be loved. And then she says, when I die, I hope to do so, having stretched my heart to its very limit. I want my heart to drag itself over the finish line, bloodied and battle-worn from having refused nothing. And with its final beat, to say, yes, death, I will love you too. Which is the same as saying, life, I will love you too, completely, utterly, holding nothing back. Remember that. And now, think of this vow. Desires are numberless. I vow to put an end to them. How?